Well, Anders,
All right.
I'll let you kickstart, and then I'll hand it over to me, and then I'll take it over. You want me to do the slides, or you want to do the slides on your end?
Yeah, Robert, I think either way is fine. I think Sean has a few welcome remarks he would like to give.
Yeah, he does. So let me put the presentation, the slides up. Make sure. Hold on a second.
I must say, this is the most European Anders has looked in a long time. I think it's the light.
I guess so.
You look like a blonde Viking.
Ah, it must be the lighting.
Well, okay. There it is. Dr. Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right. First of all, I have to say good morning. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Okay. I have prepared a rather long speech, but I think it's essential to set the ground. Okay. And what are we meeting, and also the agenda for WITSA to be part of this AI regulations so-called Concord today. Okay. Again, thank you for joining us as we continue to address the AI regulations and delve into the conversation that is not only timely, but absolutely essential for the future of technology and society. For WITSA, we recognize that AI is more than a technological advancement. It is a game changer that has the potential to reshape the very fabric of our existence, how we live, work, learn, and play. It is a force that can unlock the vast potential of data that we do every day, to ignite creativity and to fuel innovations, presenting new possibilities and opportunity for individuals, companies, and governments. This transformative power of AI must come with a great deal of responsibility. This is why WITSA continue to work with the policymakers across the globe and propose regulations to address the potential risks associated with AI. Our goal is not only to minimize harm, but also to maximize the incredible benefits that AI can bring to society. Striking the balance requires a careful and common sense approach, one that fosters innovations, encourages best practices, consensus standards, and collaborations. Today, we explore the road ahead for international AI regulations, ensuring that AI fulfills its promise while managing perceived risks. WITSA's commitment to ethical, inclusive, sustainable, and innovative AI is further echoed in the WITSA AI declarations, shaping the future through ethical, inclusive, sustainable, and innovative AI. It is a compass that guides us towards a future where AI is a force for good, contributing to the resolution of global challenges such as climate change, poverty, health, and education. You will hear more later from my Deputy Chairman, Robert Jensen, and CEO, Dan Khoo, who will further elaborate on our collective effort addressing AI risk, opportunity, and international governance. Before I go, I would like to express my gratitude. I think Doug Johnson from CTA is on the line, okay, and also Katherine Holden from techUK for joining us today, and all of you who spend time, your valuable time, okay, with us today to express valuable perspective that enrich our understanding of the challenges and opportunities in the AI landscape. Your insights are invaluable as we collectively chart the course for responsible and impactful AI development. Thank you also, Robert, Assespro, for leading this coordination of these important sessions for the industries, and to all who have joined us today. Let us leverage our collective intelligence to shape a future where AI serves as a catalyst for human progress, a partner in solving global challenges, and a force that upholds the principle of ethics, inclusivity, sustainability, and innovations. I wish everyone a fruitful session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sean. Anders? Ball in your court.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Robert. So just do a quick roll call. I think it's easier to have everybody just announce themselves. My name is Anders Halvorsen. I'm Vice President for Global Public Policy at WITSA. Robert, would you like to go next?
Yes, okay, Robert Jansen. I'm the Deputy Chairman of WITSA and Chairman of the AI Task Force. And very honored to be able to lead this task force in such a moment in time for humanity. But then I'll elaborate more furthermore, and I'll pass on to the next person who wants to present himself.
Sean, would you like to introduce yourself? You already made your remarks.
Okay, I'm Sean. Okay, I'm from Malaysia. Okay, PCOM Malaysia. I'm the chairman of WITSA.
Dan?
Hi, everybody. Hang on, am I on mute? No, I'm not. Hi, everybody. I'm Khoo. I'm the CEO of WITSA. I have succeeded our Secretary General, Dr. Jim Poison, who retired last year. So excited that we are on the cusp of what is going to be a very significant, transformative, and technological revolution in AI. Thank you.
Well, Katherine?
Everyone, good morning from the UK. My name is Katherine Holden, and I head up our work on AI at techUK. And techUK is the largest technology trade association here in the UK. And I'll tell you a bit more about what we're doing on AI policy and regulation in a short while. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And how about you, Siew?
Hi, Seah from the AIIA, the long name, Australian Information Industry Association. We've been around for 40 years. We represent 300 different tech companies of different sizes, from the sovereign SMEs to the large big names that you see. So very interested in AI. Is the rage now.
Thank you very much. Doug, how about you?
Hello, everyone. Doug Johnson. I'm with the Consumer Technology Association in the United States. We're likewise a high-tech trade association of about 1,300 members. We're also known as the organizer of the CES trade show, which is coming up in about a month.
Thank you very much, Doug. Anybody else on the call would like to introduce themselves, please?
Sure, I'll go. I'm Emily Barner, and I'm Programs Director at WITSA.
Florin Vrejeu from Romania.
Hello, Florin. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eduardo Paranhos. I lead the AI working group at the Brazilian Software Association.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Marco Lauria from AIIA, International Association of Artificial Intelligence.
Good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Mohammed Shidid, the CEO of the organization. The organization under its membership, all companies of IT, ICT, and electronics are members, and you are feeding this industry in Egypt.
Hi, I'm John Foreman. I'm based here in Rio de Janeiro, and I'm a member of Assespro.
Hi, I am Mariana from Niterói, Rio de Janeiro. I work with entrepreneur education. I am in this moment in the SOBRE, and this moment is very important because the AI is impact the education in the global. I am here to learning with you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, there are a couple other people who indicated they would participate, so we'll see if they will join.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll introduce them when they join.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Okay. So moving on, in introducing the theme that we want to discuss today is really what was the assumptions and premises that directed the task force in producing a document that could serve most governments around the world in their endeavor and their challenge of creating a regulation or a regulatory framework around AI that allows for its innovative capability and potential, while at the same time safeguarding and minimizing any type of harm. We perceive this moment in time that is very profound. It's part of what we call these greater innovation cycles. It's said to have, or that we are living now at our sixth innovation cycle, where a lot of disruption takes place. And in the process of the disruption, it obviously creates challenges in how you safeguard all the stakeholders around. Looking back, I really looked to see there are three cycles that really had a profound impact in society as a whole. The steam engine being the first. Then we had, fast forward, coming to the technological age, internet also had the same capability. And now we have AI. Probably AI of all is the one that can create a much faster disruption in society than any others in the past. And because of that, it's very important that legislators around the world understand that they have a big challenge in balancing out how to regulate to minimize harm, but at the same time, how to stimulate the potential of innovation that AI brings to society and the betterment of life quality for everyone. I don't want to take too much time here because we started a little bit late because of the glitch we had with the platform. I'd like to bring on our panelists who have a lot more proficiency in discussing AI and actually sharing across with the different geographies we have present here today between Australia, UK, Eastern Europe, Malaysia, Brazil, United States. What is happening in each geography as far as the drive of finding the right balance in a regulatory framework that allows for the innovation to take place while at the same time safeguarding any harm that can come from it. So, Andrews, I believe that we want to bring in our panelists, and I don't know which order that you thought this, but I'll pass the floor back to you so you can engage our next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind proceeding to the next slide. So, as first up, I guess it is me. WITSA recently AI regulation. So I would like to provide just a brief overview of that, and then we would move on to the various panelists, if that's okay, Robert.
Yep, indeed.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm very pleased to share some of the findings from our new position paper, which we have named Building Trust and Delivering on the Promise of Artificial Intelligence. The paper recommends a careful and common sense approach to addressing the risks arising from the rapid innovations in AI, putting the spotlight on best practices, standards, and regulation. And some of the key findings, WITSA believes that AI best practices are essential for AI developers, deployers, and implementers, as they help ensure that AI systems are fair, transparent, and accountable. The paper emphasizes that innovation and trust in new technologies, including AI, is best supported when policy objectives and regulatory requirements make use of voluntary consensus-driven standards to support and implement compliance. In order to avoid slowing AI innovation and beneficial adaptation, when or if regulations are warranted, they should adhere to a specific list of policy principles that we have identified in that paper. And here are just a few highlights of those. First of all, governments should avoid pro-human biases. They should not discriminate against AI, but permit AI systems to do what is legal for humans and prohibit what is illegal in the human realm. Businesses should therefore be allowed to use AI systems performing tasks traditionally fulfilled by people. Then governments should focus on regulating the performance of AI systems broadly and avoid prescriptive rules that address specific processes and methods that businesses must comply with. Governments, businesses, and consumers are better positioned to compare the performance of different systems and set minimum performance requirements when performance-based metrics are deployed. By enabling businesses to identify the best methods for complying with government-set performance metrics, it grants them the flexibility necessary to comply most efficiently, thereby optimizing innovation, product output, and customer value. Moreover, policymakers should only regulate sectors and not technologies or models. Since policymakers cannot foresee all future applications of AI, calls have been increasing to regulate such systems and their underlying metrics rather than specific uses. However, AI systems may be general-purpose technology and could be applied to many different applications. The risks and benefits of such systems depend entirely on how they are being used. Therefore, when or if regulations are warranted, governments should differentiate between the use cases and making narrow rules for specific AI applications in distinct sectors such as education, transportation, healthcare, stock trading, even when the underlying technology is similar. Policymakers should be careful to avoid what we call AI myopia. Many of the perceived societal harms from AI are concerns which transcend AI and have been manifest all through society for a very long time. The objective of policymakers should be to address and fix the broader problems, not just those aspects involving AI. Focusing too narrowly on AI as the culprit of a perceived problem, such as in hiring practices, for example, can divert attention away from the opportunities the AI may provide and mitigate and help address social harms. Governments should define AI precisely and narrowly to reduce the risk of setting policies that affect other software systems in unintended ways. In crafting any sort of AI regulation, policymakers must be clear on what aspects of AI they are referring to and in what context. Just to give a brief example, in one of the earlier iterations of the EU's AI Act, in an early iteration, it featured a broad enough definition of AI that even simple spreadsheet software such as Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel likely would have been covered and regulated. Such unintended errors incur significant impediment and cost on those developers and deployers of basic integration and automation products and services. Next, policymakers must recognize and enforce existing rules capable of tackling harms that may rise from AI deployment before considering any new AI-specific legislation. Many laws and regulations around the world addressing important societal issues such as discrimination, worker safety, and product liability, they already exist on a broader scale beyond the limitations of AI. In these cases, regulations already are equipped to tackle harms that may arise from AI deployment, and there be many cases where AI-specific legislation is therefore not needed. Policymakers should always consult with business and other stakeholders about how these existing regulations should be applied to emerging AI products and services. Furthermore, policymakers should take care to ensure that benefits of regulation outweighs the cost and harm to innovation, and work with stakeholders to optimize regulation to boost the uptake of trustworthy AI. They should consider the impact of regulatory intervention on compliance costs, indirect productivity, innovation, as well as competitiveness costs, such as impediments to the adoption of cost-effective emerging technologies that provide social and economic benefits. Governments must work with stakeholders to optimize regulations and boost uptake of trustworthy AI. To create a competitive ecosystem for AI, stakeholders such as industry, civil society, academia, and governments need to work together in the shaping of national, regional, and international rules and standards. Finding the most efficient ways of achieving regulatory objectives is imperative, as overly burdensome and unnecessary rules will reduce innovation, adoption, and force businesses to divert resources away from productive business activities towards compliance at the expense of the end user. Regulators should also apply non-discrimination principles to ensure that the rules are not impacting businesses differently based on their size or their location. Policymakers may be tempted to exempt smaller entities from new laws, so as a way to reduce compliance burdens on such companies with fewer resources. But a better approach is to reduce the overall compliance burdens so that they become more manageable for businesses regardless of their size. After all, if the objective of the legislation is to protect consumers from harms from AI-related products and services, then all businesses should comply with the new rules. Also, seeking expertise. Getting technical talent into the public workforce is probably the single biggest obstacle for effective regulation. Government cannot govern AI if they don't understand AI. Throughout the regulatory process, policymakers should also consult with AI experts in the sectors that they seek to regulate, as I mentioned above. Adopting regulatory sandboxes is perhaps the single most important thing governments can do with respect to AI. The idea behind a sandbox is to provide a safe space for businesses and regulators to work together to understand how new technologies can be developed and regulated in a responsible and ethical way. AI sandboxes provide several advantages, such as promoting innovation by allowing the development of new AI technologies in a controlled environment, to reduce the risk by allowing temporary exemptions from specific rules, and inviting detailed feedback on their operations to regulators, which then informs new permanent rules that take into account successful business models. This has proven to reduce the so-called time to market for innovations, giving new businesses increasing legal certainty and thereby leading to more innovation. AI sandboxes can therefore be a critical bridge between AI policy and regulation and large-scale deployment of AI solutions, as they make it possible to test new technologies under a regulator's supervision and contribute to evidence-based policymaking. It is therefore imperative that the control environment of the sandbox approach should be the first immediate and mandatory step for countries to test and experiment with new technologies, business models, and regulatory approaches. Governments should maximize the procurement of deployment of relevant AI solutions and help agencies deliver on their mission and optimize constituent services. AI regulations should take a risk-based approach and be tailored to the type of application and service. Different use cases of AI have different specific impacts, and risk profiles, and consequently require different methods to ensure risk mitigation, transparency, accountability, and fairness. Governments should encourage reliance on international consensus standards to seek to align regulatory requirements with international approaches to AI regulation. And governments should seek to boost the overall digital transformation by increasing investment in research and innovation, strengthening digital education and skills training, as well as encouraging data access and infrastructure development. Funding for AI research and development should be a top priority, and governments should encourage multi-stakeholder partnerships and lab-to-market initiatives, such as centers for excellence, innovation hubs, or research centers that underpin industry's crucial role in developing and deploying AI solutions. And then finally, policymakers should protect the foundation of AI systems, including source code, proprietary algorithms, and other intellectual property. They should avoid requirements that force companies to transfer or provide access to technology, source code, algorithms, and encryption keys as conditions for doing business with the federal government or as a general practice for business-to-business operations. In conclusion, whether the promise of AI delivers on its potential depends on how well the AI ecosystem, governments, and other stakeholders manage perceived risks while fostering a regulatory environment that encourages innovation, best practices, consensus standards, and international collaboration. So thank you very much for that, Robert. I think we are ready to proceed with our other panelists. And first of all, Dan, we have Dan, our CEO. Would you like to make some remarks?
Thank you, Anders. That was excellent. So, yeah, so let me just start by saying that we are so fortunate that we are actually in this stage, and we are not just spectators, but active participants as the age of AI unfolds right before our eyes. So what does this mean? I see two key aspects that I think are crucial to our discussion. The first is the game-changing impact of AI. I like to think of this as the Jedi side of the Force. And therein, I see AI for the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. How can we use AI for the betterment of all of these bottom lines? And that is crucial because of the way in which AI can positively create change. For that to happen, use cases, business models, and all of those things that make sustainable concern on innovation or invention go to market and then become sustainable is critical. Innovation and entrepreneurship, R&D and talent development, AI compute power and infrastructure is so critical today that it has become something of an arms race. Countries are now seeing that they can either block others from access to some of these arms, compute power, or they can race far ahead and not just countries, companies as well, obviously. You see the numbers that NVIDIA has published with regards to the prior quarter, where over 500,000 units of their GPUs have actually been snapped up and are going to all the tech giants. And that is going to impact the bottom lines of these companies in the quarters to come. On the other side of that coin is the dark side of the force. Here, obviously, critical information infrastructure attacks, deepfakes, fraud and scams, discrimination and biases, privacy invasion, and heaven forbid in the future, singularity. So these elements whilst they may appear to be competing, but and throughout all the innovation, the technological revolutions that we have experienced, I think it is just in this time that we have really found the need to recommend to governments to actually create policy and regulation that would foster innovation whilst containing some of the negative elements to come. So it's not just an arms race, it is also a gold rush. For some companies, individuals, it is the opportunity similar to the time when people were panning for gold. The providers of the shovels, the picks, and the miners, as they were rushing to mine that yellow stuff, actually can be akin to the ones that are providing the compute power today. But know that it is going to require more than just the mining for gold. It is going to require that in the future, there will be use cases that are developed. There will be applications like the ways in which jewelry is made. Why does gold continue to hold our value? It's because of the use cases. So AI has to get from what is the promise to eventually the delivery of that potential. So to get there from here, we have that position paper that we think is critical. It's important for nations and for, of course, firms, for individuals as well, but certainly for regions and countries to consider introducing the policy statements as well as the stuff that we've seen. So I'll just give you a very quick run through. On September 28th this year, we published a position paper, Building Trust and Delivering on the Promise of AI. On October the 9th, same year, we released the WITSA AI Declaration. It's, I think of it as easy, EISI, ethical, inclusive, sustainable, and innovative AI. But look at what has happened. I'm not saying that its cause is a causal effect, but President Biden had an executive order on AI out on October the 30th that, you know, he wants to ensure America leads the way in seizing the promise and managing the risks of AI. And then we have heard recently, as recent as a few days ago, December the 9th, the EU, they came to an agreement on the AI Act, where I like their way of doing things. Risk-based regulations with regards to, you know, almost like censorship in a way. So the regulations kick in depending on the risk, whether it's minimal, no risk, limited risk, high risk, or unacceptable risks. So those things will then have track different regulations, as well as they're not forgetting that they need to support AI innovation and investments as well. And there are provisions therein that go beyond governance and enforcement that boosts AI innovation. So I know that we will hear from AIIA with regards to the stuff that's happening in that jurisdiction, as well as from the UK, and we would love to hear from others as well. And not just that, also work with our members in making sure that the arms race is not exclusive, it's inclusive, so that we actually bring benefit, again, to the triple bottom line. People, planet, and profit. Thanks, Anders. Back over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. Maybe we can go to the next slide, Robert. So next up, we got Doug Johnson with the Consumer Technology Association. Over to you, Doug.
Thank you, Anders. I'll go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Does that work?
Yep, that works.
Okay. Well, thank you again to the WITSA leadership for bringing everybody together like this from regions and countries around the world on a common topic in which we're all involved to one extent or another. So my contribution here is to give you a high-level overview of the state of regulation, the public policy making that's going on in the United States. I've got a few slides to illustrate a few different activities, but I'm certainly happy to take questions when we get to that phase later on. So moving to the next, oops. So the policy activity in the United States largely is taking place in a few different arenas at the federal and state level. You have the White House, you have what the President of the United States has done recently, as Dan just mentioned. I'll get into the details of that with the executive order. You have activity in the US Congress, in our legislative branch, which includes hearings and development of actual legislation. And then you have federal departments and agencies, which over the past 3 years or so, at least, have been issuing requests for information, requests for comment on their approaches to AI in particular sectors of the economy. At the US state level, we have 50 jurisdictions, and many of them are taking a look at AI in different ways. Governors of those states with executive orders themselves, their own legislatures at the state level, and their own regulatory agencies. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But let's not forget that policymaking isn't exclusively in the realm of the government. I think that's important to keep in mind generally. There are a lot of contributions, in fact, necessary contributions happening from the private sector that will ultimately help deliver the promise of AI and ensure trustworthy AI development. And those include principles, governance frameworks, risk management frameworks, voluntary commitments that are made by companies, and of course, the development of industry standards. I want to go back to the beginning of this year when we had in the United States the publication of something that had been worked on for the previous couple of years, and that is the AI risk management framework that was developed by an agency of our Department of Commerce, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And it really has been the outstanding contribution to AI governance and risk management in the United States to date. It was developed through a great consensus process involving a lot of perspectives from the public and private sector. It is a voluntary document. It will evolve over time, but it is designed to help organizations, large and small, manage the risks associated with AI development and deployment. Dan mentioned that executive order from President Biden a few weeks ago, and that was long anticipated, and it was voluminous, many pages of directives and deadlines, but it all is under the umbrella of doing things at the federal government level of the United States that are supposed to ensure the safety, security, and trustworthiness of artificial intelligence. There were a couple of related announcements just after that executive order was promulgated. The United States announced that it would be creating an AI Safety Institute, and this is a parallel to what I think we'll hear from the UK shortly that has taken place over there. And also, the White House put out some draft policy guidance on the US government's own procurement and use of AI. And comments were collected a few days ago in that proceeding. Executive order has many provisions related to safety, workers, civil rights, the government's own use of AI, privacy protections, and our work with international organizations and foreign countries. Just about every topic you can think of is reflected in the executive order concerning AI, and that's not surprising because AI touches just about everything, it seems. So you've got a lot of topics, a lot of issues, and a lot of directives throughout this large document. Many deadlines as well that extend into 2025, although most of the deadlines will be in 2024 and largely in the first half of the year. It's pretty ambitious, but it does direct federal agencies and departments to do a large number of things. Probably our Department of Commerce has the biggest to-do list in this executive order. There are some other provisions that we're not so focused on at the Consumer Technology Association, but that are also part of this executive order, and they concern the intersection of AI and weapons. There are directives related to the Department of Defense, military and national security. There are also directives related to federal funding and grants. We're not so involved in those at CTA, but they also are part of the executive order. Then, apart from the executive branch and the president, you also have, of course, the Congress, which I mentioned earlier, and there are several bills. I've listed the titles here. You probably won't recognize a lot of these names outside of the United States. They're the bill sponsors or the supporters of these legislative frameworks. But there's several bills or legislative frameworks that are out there now concerning AI that we're involved in and have discussions about with our Congress. We're looking at these federal legislative drafts and bills and frameworks, looking for several elements that are important to have, we think. Obviously, being clear in definitions, understanding how risk assessments will be made, whether there will be some sort of licensing regime, which we don't support, content authentication requirements, national security issues, elements that ensure transparency and explainability. So there are a lot of angles that we look for in these proposals, or that these proposals have included in them so far. There are other ways that our Congress is getting up to speed on artificial intelligence. On the Senate side, there have been several AI insight forums held to date. Our CEO participated in one of those last month. You also have ongoing hearings, congressional hearings, committees and subcommittees, bringing private sector stakeholders together to talk about what they're doing relative to AI, or what the technology is, how the technology is evolving. And so there's an ongoing process of educating policymakers on Capitol Hill. I mentioned I wanted to give a picture of the state legislative landscape because it's important. We have a form of government in the United States that is based on federalism, and the states do play a large role in developing policies in a lot of areas. Nowadays, that often includes areas concerning technology. Artificial intelligence is one of those, and we've been tracking about 130 different bills at the state level in more than 30 states. So most of the states in the United States have done things related to AI policy, whether that's from their legislatures or their governors. It's something we need to track, and certainly we want to avoid an outcome where we have a fractured 50-state approach to AI policy in the United States. We need something that's organized at the national level very clearly, and I can talk more about that later. But the state activity tends to fall into four main groups. You see them here on the screen. There are a lot of bills concerning automated decision-making, many that concern biometrics and facial recognition. Some of those bills concern access to data and consumer rights. And then others simply set up state-level task forces and commissions to gather information and make recommendations about AI to the state legislature and their decision-making going forward. There are also state executive actions, executive orders at the state level that mostly concern security, are advisory in nature, coming up with recommendations to the governor, and some that set up councils and task forces. But several states have done executive orders in addition to the federal, in addition to the U.S. president's executive order. So I'll conclude here by just giving an idea of how we as CTA, as a tech association, are addressing artificial intelligence in light of this very active landscape. And we're doing so comprehensively. We're active in the public policy making that I've been talking about. We're also developing industry standards. We're also doing market research studies to understand public perceptions around AI. We're certainly engaging with the media and producing commentaries on a lot of the issues that are raised by AI. And then lastly, as I mentioned in my introduction, we're the organization that produces and hosts the CS trade show in January. And that show, that platform, is certainly a venue for showcasing AI technology, as well as talking about a lot of these issues. And that takes place in about a month. I'll conclude there and thank you again for your attention.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. So, Katherine, thank you so much for being on the program today. Would you like to proceed with your remarks?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. Unfortunately, I don't have slides, so apologies. You're just going to hear directly from me. I'm very happy to answer any questions during the second half of this webinar. Just a brief introduction to techUK for those that maybe haven't come across us before. techUK, we are the largest technology trade association here in the UK. We have about 1,000 members in membership. About 2/3 of those members are SMEs, so very much representing the SME and sort of scale-up startup community as well. And as you would expect, that's everyone from your big tech giants, IBM, Microsoft, Meta, DeepMind there somewhere in the middle, down to some of our smaller members, which include the likes of Faculty AI and Wave, who are a relatively new autonomous vehicle company here in the UK. I guess our work that we do within the AI program, which is very long-standing and well-established, we've been working in this space for at least the last decade, if not longer, is really looking at how do we ensure this technology can grow and flourish here in the UK, and where we recognise barriers, whether they're cultural, regulatory, political, or technical, how we look at working with various stakeholders to overcome these issues and mitigate those, whilst also ensuring that we're balancing the narrative that can sometimes in this area be fairly negative with some of the brilliant cutting edge use cases that we have from across our membership. We're structured in a way we have various leadership committees and working groups with a tremendous focus this year, I guess, on AI regulation, governance, and of course, ethics, working very closely with the Department for Innovation, Science and Technology within central government, but also increasingly more of our regulators. And I'll come on to exactly why we're doing that in just a moment. But it's not just regulation that we're focusing on this year, even though this year has absolutely been the year for AI regulation and what that means in the UK. We're very cognizant of the fact that actually we have a long tail of British enterprises who really at the moment aren't capitalising or making the most of AI technology. And there is a risk that they will be left behind and lose that kind of competitive advantage. So we're also trying to ensure that government isn't just focusing on AI regulation, there's also a focus on the importance of AI adoption and those enabling actions that can enable people to embark on that AI journey. We published a report earlier this year, which I'd be very happy to put in the chat if helpful, our AI adoption report, which basically we worked with a number of different members, large and small, to identify what are they seeing as some of the most pressing, immediate barriers to AI adoption currently. And I'm sure these will ring true with people from across all jurisdictions, but they include inconsistent data quality, a lack of trust in AI, limiting organizational culture and understanding of AI, insufficient compute infrastructure, and probably arguably the biggest one, the gap, the AI skills gap, which when we survey our members comes back consistently year on year as one of the biggest barriers, not just in AI, but to tech adoption across the piece. So that's one thing we've been certainly doing. But as I said, a huge priority this year has been on the AI white paper. So the AI white paper was published in March of this year by government, by central government. This was very much an outline of their proposals of how they plan to govern and regulate AI in the UK going forward. It was quite a different approach they took this time, actually. The concept is still I wouldn't say half-baked, but they very much produce something which is showing they're working, recognizing they don't have answers to, you know, all of the issues and challenges surrounding AI at the moment, and the need to iterate in the open as this technology evolves and changes. The approach though that was set out, techUK and its members have broadly been very supportive of. It's a risk-based approach, it's proportionate, it very much focuses on principles, so it's principle-based, and it actually ensures that individual regulators, so across the UK landscape, have the ability to determine what AI regulation should look like within their own regulatory remit. So this is very much building on the brilliant kind of regulatory regime we have here in the UK, and using that to then decide and determine what the gaps are. And we think this is reasonable for a few reasons. I guess the fact that it's AI principles based means that we're focusing more on the outcomes of the technology rather than the technology itself, which hopefully future-proofs the proposal that's been put forward as the technology changes and evolves. And the fact that we're looking at this from an individual regulatory perspective means that actually we recognise that actually within each of these different individual regulators, they have a really good and solid understanding of how AI has already been used within their own regulatory regimes. They understand the existing regulation, but also where those gaps may exist. So we think they're well placed and have the best expertise to be able to sort of deliver on this mission. I guess one of the criticisms or one of the areas of concern is how do you ensure that each of the regulators don't go off and do their own thing? And so they have also proposed in the white paper the creation of a central function. And this function will sit above all the regulators. It's not a regulator itself, but it's simply a coordinatory function that will work with each of the regulators to help them determine what, I guess, guidance in this space, allow them to kind of work effectively together to coordinate and collaborate when they're developing further regulation, and also provide some guidance on what high risk AI looks like. So that the plan is for there to be further scrutiny of areas that are deemed high risk, and low risk applications should be able to kind of continue business as usual, and there should be the free flow and ability to innovate as usual. So we are broadly very, very supportive of that work. I think two things for us though are two kind of main points back to government are the need to continue to move at pace. This white paper was produced in March. We were expecting government's response to the white paper with a roadmap in September. It's now December, we haven't received it. And we know as of today, hearing from the Secretary of State who gave evidence to Parliament today, that we're now expecting it in the new year. So, we need to move at considerable pace to give industry that certainty and clarification as to how AI will be regulated. And the other point is, whilst we definitely think that regulators are best placed to regulate AI and govern AI within their own remits, some of our regulators are more capable and prepared for this than others. So in the UK, we have almost 95 regulators that exist. Some of them will need to be more prepared for AI than others. And I'd say some of them, like we have the Information Commissioner's Office, the Competition Markets Authority, the Financial Conduct Authority, to name but a few, are very well prepared. But actually, we need to ensure that there's greater resourcing and capacity amongst some of those other regulators as well. So another area which techUK has been considerably advocating for in recent months has been ensuring that regulators have more capacity and funding in order to carry out their new roles and responsibilities. And I don't want to go over, sorry, but I just briefly wanted to, I think I'll leave my comments on the EU AI Act for the discussion to follow. But just in one final kind of policy initiative or area that's been of kind of considerable interest to us, and I'm sure others in recent months, has been the Global AI Safety Summit, which took place on the 1st and 2nd of November in Bletchley Park here in the UK. That was a really interesting event that took place, bringing together kind of global leaders to discuss predominantly the risks associated with frontier AI safety. We think the event, we were very sort of supportive of the event. I think it raised attention as to some of the long-term risks associated with this technology and the need for kind of global collaboration. And it was great to see such an appetite amongst different global leaders to work together in collaboration. There were a number of commitments that were made during that event, and we're keen to see further momentum on those looking ahead to 2024. Again, we've published a blog on that, so I'm very happy to put that in the chat in a moment. And I think one thing though, one reflection from me on that is, beyond just kind of the need to build momentum on some of those commitments and announcements in the new year, I think there's definitely a question around how do we support policymakers balance some of the short-term, medium and long-term risks associated with this technology. So the summit very much focused on some of those long-term, slightly more potentially existential risks that may or may not happen. But actually in one of the, so techUK ran the only official industry engagement pre the AI Safety Summit with officials from government. And it very much became clear that whilst that's an important area to focus on, there are some more short-term, medium-term issues. For example, cybersecurity, information integrity, deepfakes and mis and disinformation that are more immediate concerns, particularly in light of general elections next year. Someone told me the other day, I think there's 45 elections taking place during 2024 alone. So those are really issues that actually we want to make sure rise up the political agenda and we focus on again at the beginning of next year. Anyway, I have probably spoken enough there. Very happy to answer some questions in the second half of this session. And thanks again for inviting me to speak. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Katherine. Appreciate it. And Siew from Australia. Thank you so much. I know that the time is not ideal for you. So thank you very much for staying up and helping us with this program.
Thank you. And I'm going to share my slides as well.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah, you can see it.
Wonderful. Okay. So I think the best way to share where we are is this particular slide. And this is put together by our Department of Industry. Let me take you through it. So from the left to the right is on how mandatory or voluntary the different pieces of legislation / policies are. So on the left is more voluntary, on the right is more regulatory. And then from the top, it's more AI specific. And then the bottom is more just individual sector specific. So you could see the round ones are the Australian regulations. So you can see that in terms of AI specific regulation, there's only really 2 regulations existing right now in Australia. The Commonwealth, which is the federal government, AI ethics framework, which is voluntary. And then the state-based, which is New South Wales State AI Assurance Framework. We don't really have an actual AI Act, much like the EU's model. We are thinking about it, and there's currently a consultation of it at the moment. But I wanted to point out something to you. We have a lot of economy-wide legislation. We have the Privacy Act that controls data privacy, data collection. Online Safety Act, which controls how online the generated content will be safe for use. We've got other types of inquiry happening at the moment, which is about digital platforms, so about the big tech, and how they generate, how safe their products are. And then we've got and then down at the bottom, we've got sectoral based legislation. So for example, we've got a regulatory framework for automated vehicles, or we've got basically, say for example, regulation of software of medical devices. All that to show you that not only we do not have an AI regulation or legislation, we also have very disparate legislation governing different parts of the economy. So Australia struggles to find a consistent approach for AI. And in order to organize a regulatory approach for AI, it kind of had to go through all these pieces and uplift all of them all together. So the next slide is basically all the different updates that are currently being planned. So for example, the Privacy Act review is currently under consultation. We just have the government responded to the submissions made by members of the public or associations like mine. And they agreed to do something about updating the Privacy Act, for example. Another one that is currently being looked at is the copyright laws. So with generative AI, we think a lot of the impact would be felt by copyright laws, basically. So for example, who owns the generated picture? Is it the original, original person who took the photo, or is it, a different person who decided to alter the photo using generating AI, for example? So that's currently the government is standing up an expert group to discuss what are the practical examples currently that are stopping AI from innovating AI because of the copyright laws. And then there's all these other work that are currently being updated for different parts of different types of legislation that could be impacted by AI at the moment. And just today, the government released a mid-year budget that basically set aside about $20 million to update all of this legislation, not just for AI, but to become digital ready or future ready. I won't go through all of them. I'm happy to share the slides later. I wanted to let you know there's another problem that Australia has in pulling together an AI Act. Not only does it have to contend with all these different sectorial-based legislation, it also have to contend jurisdiction issue, which is much like what Dato talked about. In Australia, we have the Commonwealth government, and then we have 6 states and 2 territories. And the Commonwealth government, according to our Constitution, Section 51, has very little little responsibility that it alone can do. So, for example, it can do trade, it can do migration issues, but digital technology is not one of those. So whenever it wants to do something, it kind of have to do it with the other states or get them to come along to do it with the other states. So one way they try to do it is there's this thing called the Data and Digital Ministers Roundtable, where all the different jurisdictions come together and agree on an approach. Currently, the most recent decision is to agree on following the New South Wales state AI model, which is what I mentioned just now. If you could recall from this slide, they are a bit more on the mandatory ready AI specific framework. So I'm going to go through the New South Wales framework because that is something that they would base, the Australian model would be based on. So under the New South Wales framework, in 2020, the New South Wales came out with an AI strategy along with an AI ethics policy. So these two came out together. The strategy is supposed to outline a vision for the use of AI by the government only. So this is not going to regulate industry. This is just regulating the government use of AI. And then the ethics is going to come out. It came out with 5 principles on how it's going to use the AI. Those 5 principles primarily is there to say you are allowed to use AI, but here's your guardrails or your guiding posts. And in a way, it kind of tried to get the government to be unafraid of AI. It demystify AI. So that's what the AI ethics policy is supposed to do. I want to point out of these 5, the one that I'm most proud of, and I was the team that helped do the policy, part of the team back then, was consumer benefit. And I think this is something that's relevant to what Dato was saying earlier, which is about how do you frame the problem? If a lot of companies or government frame the problem as this is an efficiency problem and AI is going to automate a lot of the processes and pack in the intelligence to just decide what to do, then there's an unintended consequence. Whereas if we just frame a problem on how do we help the people we're trying to help, that changes the dynamic. So I'll give you a very quick case study, which is Revenue New South Wales. Revenue New South Wales goes around and collect revenue, so parking fines, etc. So what happens then is that Revenue New South Wales, instead of framing the problem as we are here to just collect fines more efficiently, they change it to how do we help vulnerable citizens who are unable to collect fines. So they set the algorithm as how do we identify vulnerable people, and then they have a couple of criteria. For example, like they're not paying their fines on time, they seem to be struggling, and then it kind of generates solutions. Like, for example, if we help, if we make you not pay fine, but you should go on a program to deal with your drug use issues, how do you feel about that? So that's basically how the AI ethics principle, consumer benefit principle, is used. You see a lot of the other ones that are similar to a lot of the other models out there, like trust, transparency, fairness, privacy, accountability. But consumer benefit is one of the more different ones that we've used. There's an assurance framework, which is a mandatory process for self-assessment. So there's a list of basically questions they have to ask themselves. What is the general benefit assessment, general risk assessment, risk factors for individuals or communities? Does it comply with the 5 ethics principles we talked about just now? What are the possible harm? What are the possible secondary and cumulative harm? And then I talked about what about the alignment to the different legal framework. Again, remember, we've got the Commonwealth level of legislation, but we also have state level of different legislation. So we've got things like Anti-Discrimination Act, for example. So even at the state level, there's a whole group of different legislation. Even the state level will have to comply with. And then there's a review committee. The review committee would look at all the projects that are using AI or being funded by government money, and then review it. And then currently there is a parliamentary inquiry to see if all of these are working as intended or not. So that's the whole model of a strategy, a policy that guides it, an assurance framework on procurement, a review coming back, and then a parliamentary inquiry of the entire framework. There you go. So now I'm going to turn towards the Commonwealth federal experience. So I'm talking still about regulating AI use in the government. Not very far ago, in a couple of months ago. Or rather, a few years ago, the Commonwealth government tried to use AI. Again, it's the same problem. They're trying to use AI to collect money. And they've done it in a really bad way, where they misapplied the algorithm, they misinterpreted the law, they calculated it wrongly, but you kind of can't fight it. So basically, they've gone around issuing debt notices, saying you owe the government taxes and up to tens of thousands of dollars. It is reported that people have killed themselves over it. It is reported that there are just a lot of that when people challenge it, back then that government would kind of punish the citizen who challenged it by releasing some private information. That it generated a whole royal commission into robo-debt scheme. This scheme is called robo-debt scheme, and there were 57 recommendations, and part of this 57 recommendation include a consistent legal framework, which goes back to that table saying that we can't have different legislation expecting the citizens to figure out where they have a cause, to complain against the government for its use of AI. You have to have a single one. There's also recommendation to establish a body to monitor and audit automated decision making. It's not quite AI, but it's close to it. But in there too is a kind of a small little chapter of unnamed individuals, so government people who were involved in this project, who has been referred for criminal and civil prosecution. And that is sending shivers down the government. So the reason why I wanted to say this is that now the government is currently thinking, do we want to set a regulation to punish, or do we want to set a regulation to enable and encourage innovation within the government? And currently the sentiment, the regulatory environment is be on the safe side. And that's the same thing about risk-based approach to regulation, right? The government has a higher responsibility than the industry in a way, because a lot of people using government services cannot opt out of government services. So I wanted to separate the regulation of the government, and then now I'm going to move to the regulation of industry. The government is a lot more friendly to the industry use of AI. So in just last month, Australia signed the, I'm going to butcher the way this thing is called, Bletchley. You're welcome to correct me on my pronunciation. Declaration at the AI Safety Summit in the UK. So the government is more willing to work with other jurisdictions to find a way to kind of evaluate AI models together, work together and share expertise and learn together. And I think this is more about enabling innovation, finding ways to kind of standardize some of these rules. So I think there might be a bit more, again, so I think the government's going to have to contend with all these competing factors. How does it want to regulate government uses of AI? How does it want to regulate private uses of AI? How does it want to regulate it in the context of the different legislation? How does it want to regulate in the context of different jurisdiction? Finally, because this segment has a bit about AI, the state of AI regulation in Australia and Asia Pacific, I'll just mention very quickly Asia Pacific, which is, in this case, I'll just mention Singapore. Singapore also, from what we researched, it doesn't seem to have an AI Act, but it has the same, very similar. It's got an AI governance framework. It's got implementation and self-assessment guidelines. So it's still quite voluntary. But what I wanted to call, it's got a council on AI ethics. So much like the review committee. So, but what we wanted to call out is we were just in US and we noticed that US-Singapore announced a strategic partnership. And they've gone into more details like mapping exercise of the different frameworks that they've got, a working group together and to focus on advancing shared principle, exploring reciprocal certification programs. So now that adds another layer of the regulatory approach the government is kind of contend with, which is, you can't necessarily have a singular national approach to regulating AI. For digital trade, you almost have to have harmonization of regulation. So that's another regulatory approach that this government or the Australian government would have to contend with. I would just also add a quick note as well, which is, unfortunately, I can't delve deep into another big powerhouse, which is China. I do speak Mandarin and I can read Chinese, but China has a very different legal system. Unlike a lot of us here, China does not have common law system, nor the civil law system. So how China regulates its own use of AI is going to be quite a game changer. But I'll leave it there because I don't think I'm the expert in looking at Chinese AI regulation. But I do want to leave you this. So like many of us here, the Australian Information Industry Association also has a white paper called Navigating AI paper. We basically recommended to the government to use the risk-based approach. We also, I wanted to highlight something, which is we also want the government to use a very flexible and adaptable regulatory response. Just to give you a case in point, I mentioned that we were in the US looking at some of the AI products and services out there. And we noticed, for example, right now it's not necessary that you go out procuring AI directly, is that you already have products that didn't have AI and you suddenly find a feature of AI in there called the co-pilot and being turned on. So how would regulation treat those products and services? How would it apply retrospectively as well? So we're trying to tell the government you need to move fast. You can't wait for roundtables and then months later there's a different product or different feature being turned on. So that's what we've been asking the government to do. The other thing is we said to the government, you need to be exemplar of AI principles as well. And then we've got other consideration, like the government just need to up its understanding of AI and the value chain of AI being deployed and what different types of regulation might look like. I'll leave it there. I think I did spend 10 minutes already. Happy to take questions after as well.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was a very detailed and very insightful overview. Thank you so much. So, Robert, over to you.
Well, I thank you all. And yes, I'd like to just really jump in. And one of the questions that brings in how we're going to be able to collaborate cross-border on a global scale. But before I do that, I would like our chairman, Dr. Sean, maybe perhaps he could share with us what are WITSA's expectations with the AI declaration recently on shaping the future through ethical, inclusive, sustainable, and innovative AI. Now, who are our intended readers, and what are the takeaways that we expect as WITSA that we can have from our declaration?
Okay, I'll just say a few words. Maybe Dan could also jump in. He's from Malaysia as well. So my association in Malaysia is called PCOM, and I can say among others, okay, AI is something that we are figuring out, okay, how to reposition ourselves, okay, in terms of advocating AI is for good, okay, for the government, okay. Since the WCIT in Kuching, okay, in October, okay, we have been working with PCOM, I think through the effort led by Dan. Okay, we have been working with PCOM, okay, trying to set up a concept called a Center of Excellence, okay, for that drive the initiative of AI in Malaysia. Again, it being a technology adopter, okay, Malaysia adopt technologies. Okay, a lot of things that we are not in the creator side. Okay, we're looking for what is the best practices. Okay, what are the key things, okay, that government of Malaysia should adopt. Okay, for some of you who have been to the WCIT recently in Kuching, October, the Premier of Sarawak, okay, is a big fan of generative AI. Yeah, he spent about a long period of time, okay, on the stage, okay, talking about his belief in how generative AI will be a key factor of developing the state in the country. So again, the interest is definitely intense for that matter. Okay, I think then we have spoken to MDEC, the Malaysia Digital Economy Corp. Okay, they are very keen to explore on a global stage, okay, Again, as I say, Malaysia is an adopter. So I can say, what are the things that are widely available out there? Of course, everybody's talking about ChatGPT. Okay, how do we use ChatGPT to develop applications? Certainly is of interest for a country like Malaysia, okay, to adopt such technology, okay, to develop a new applications that they can deploy for various usage, okay, in this part of the world. So again, from our association point of view, PCOM, okay, again, we are part of this declarations, okay, and AI declaration that we saw announced in WCIT in Kuching. So we need to see what are the takeaways, okay, that will fit for Malaysia, okay, to work together with the rest of the world, okay, to harness what AI can bring, not only to the business, okay, for the individuals and the daily businesses, daily lifestyle, as well as for government. Okay, that's all I could describe. Then anything you want to add?
Dan?
I'm not mute. And all right. So thanks for that. I think specifically with regards to your question, Robert, I believe that, you know, from a global perspective, we obviously have differing levels of maturity from our member countries that obviously the most advanced ones are already forging ahead with the kinds of stuff that we've heard recently. And then there are the others, the less mature, in fact, the emerging ones as well. And WITSA's membership comprises all different levels. So it is our aim and our intent to provide the basically to first of all encourage the need and the setting up of an AI regulatory framework within each of our member economies. I think that's number one. Second is, when such a framework is then considered, we want to be sure that the paper has solid recommendations. And these recommendations also are backed by best practices, as the kinds that you've heard Anders talked about. So key things there, so the audience would be our member associations to take these nuggets to then craft their own policy recommendations to the government in consultation with the respective ministries. Now, whether it is the Ministry of the Justice Departments or the legal aspects, or whether it's the investment side. So that would depend on each of the member economies. I think that's important. So that's directly in answer to that. I think Sean as well alluded to the WITSA AI Center of Excellence that we're building a paper on. Kind of like what would then, as a result of the paper, the recommendations in the policy paper, how do we take that into action? So we're building WITSA AI Center of Excellence paper that would then also help encourage all of those things that I talked about earlier with regards to both the game-changing impact as well as harnessing the power of the force, as well as mitigating against the dark side of this power. Yep, that's all I have to add. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'd like to take another question, and I guess this is as a result of what we heard today, and I'd like to see the point of view of the different countries and regions that we have here. What is the merit, and if it's actually necessary, for having an international AI regulatory type of entity who can actually practice oversight and at the same time be able to create a common baseline that considers what is globally accepted, but also it addresses issues that are very local. So I'd like to take this question first to Katherine, and then I'll move on to Doug and to Siew. What is your take about having an overall, like a United Nations AI regulatory agency?
Yeah, very, very interesting concept. And I think something that we probably need to flesh out in a bit more detail to determine exactly what they would do, what their aims and objectives would be, and how countries would work together in collaboration there. I think one thing that I'm very aware of, and we held a panel on exactly this topic a week ago, there are so many different international efforts going on at the moment by different parties, different groups. There is certainly a need for greater levels of collaboration and coordination to make sure that there is no duplication of efforts and that work is, as I said, coordinated and joined up. So I think there certainly is amongst many an appetite for some sort of body. I think it just probably needs further thoughts and further consideration. I also wonder whether actually the focus would be more on the creation of global standards and frameworks initially, rather than AI regulation, because I think currently different countries are at very different stages and very much focusing on their own domestic policies in that space. So I think that focusing on AI regulation specifically, personally, I think could be slightly premature. But some of those other initiatives, I think there's definitely an opportunity there.
Very well, Katherine. Doug, how do we, from the United States perception, see such an international body, either on the regulation side or on the standards and best practices side?
Well, personally and organizationally, we don't like the idea. I don't hear a lot of support for that from our members. I think international cooperation is important, and I like Katherine's point about the importance of global standards to support compliance with AI rules and to facilitate trade. Speaking of trade, I would like to see a much greater focus on cross-border data flows. That is super important to AI and just about everything we work on in this industry. So there's opportunity for global cooperation and focus on some fundamentals like standards and trade, but the idea of a supranational global regulator of AI doesn't have much appetite here in the United States, as far as I can tell. That's not to say that there aren't supporters here, but it's not something that we're championing at CTA.
Yeah. So, Siew, in Australia, what's the perception of such of an international body, either being the regulating side or on the best practices and standards perception?
I think I echo both Katherine and Doug. I think the problem here is that everybody's trying to do something. So United Nations just launched the AI advisory body. And I would also say there's a Standards Australia, or the ISO standards, and Australia's been part of it, setting up standards on AI governance as well. I suppose where our strength is that view of industry that maybe government bodies don't have as well. So I think if we can kind of marry up what the pain point is and where our particular strengths are that can help solve it, we probably can find a good spot where we can play. So I think that it just needs to be flushed out a bit more on where we can play that the other bodies are not good at.
Very good.
I might also add, we do practice in Australia, within Australia, we do have different associations joining together and write letters and advocate for positions that we have in common. And I can see from the presentation just now, we all have, we all like the risk-based approach, for example. We all, so I think there's a few things that we already are in alignment that we could at least work together on.
Thank you. I'd like to bring a use case perception and actually field a question from the audience. Initially, we had thought about addressing the intellectual property issue, but there's a question around education, which I think is a very sensitive area. And how does AI actually play within the education field? And what would be considered a good benchmark currently right now, and how AI can affect the education segment, the education sector? I'd like to bring that first to Katherine and see what the UK's perception is.
Yeah, so I think it's undoubtable that particularly in the light of sort of generative AI and other more powerful technologies, that it's going to have huge implications for the education sector. I mean, I'm already hearing stories of people using ChatGPT and others to write their homework and mark their essays. So I think it's probably going to lead to a whole rehaul of how we test and how we educate people in the system. We have in the UK a Department for Education that this year has launched a call for evidence, or a formal consultation to get an understanding from both the tech companies in terms of what are the capabilities, what do they see as the risks, but also importantly from the education sector itself, the teachers, the ones who actually are at the forefront of this and dealing with this on a daily basis. I think there's no point shying away from the challenge that we face. We need to address it head on. And it's a complicated one. It's going to take a lot of people thinking about, as I said, how we rehaul our system, how we test people. But in all honesty, that's probably an area, at least in the UK, that's quite overdue anyway. I think the way we test people is quite often quite archaic and needs looking at, and maybe this is the start of something new and something very exciting. So whilst it is obviously a challenge for many, I think it also will present some opportunities as well.
Yes, and I'm going to move on to Doug on the same question, and seeing that you have already made a comment about the Department of Education having some material regarding AI in education.
Yes, this is not an area where we've gone deep, but I do know on the potential of AI in education that it does offer a lot of promise to create customized learning plans, lesson plans for students in the classroom. But like any other application of AI, you have to train those who are using the technology. So it's got two aspects, certainly in that regard. Teachers need to understand how best to use AI in the classroom. It is showing up, as Katherine mentioned, in terms of students turning to chatbots and other tools as a resource. But teachers need to get educated on how best to use technology. And then, of course, those who are in school and those of us who are in the professional world, to the extent that AI will impact our professions, we all need to build skills in this area, in the classroom and outside. I think that's very important. And it's really been a constant for many years in our industry. High-tech skills, science, technology, engineering, and math are relevant today with AI as they have ever been over the years.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Robert. I will read the material with Share with me. Thanks.
Here at the end, I'd like to actually bring also to Siew Lee, what does it take on the education perspective in Australia?
So in Australia, we have this thing, it's taken a life of its own. It's called the Digital Skills Compact. And so I mentioned the 6 states. So New South Wales is the first to go. New South Wales tend to be the one leading most of the time. So they just started a Digital Skills Compact with 6 pillars. First pillar is co-design and deliver a marketing campaign to uplift perceptions of the digital career. Project 2 is map and progress opportunities to improve retention in digital tertiary education and early careers. Project 3 is about better data on diversity. Project 4 is about expanding digital traineeships and reskilling opportunity. Project 5 is about industry education forum. I'll copy the link here, so then it's easy. But the point there is that, so our focus, at least in AIIA, is we want to quickly move people into jobs. We think there are 85,000 jobs will be lacking in a couple of years' time. So we need to quickly retrain people So a lot of the education pathway that we're focusing on is how do we have work integrated learning. So we're not just producing students who have theoretical understanding, we're producing them with a set of practical skills as well. So that's just students. And then we are also, we have been given grants from the Queensland government to train existing workers to help them reskill or transfer their skills. So this program is called the Micro Credential Skills 2023. So we're doing that as well. I'll move on to two other levels of education, if you don't mind. The other level of education is not just student, it's about teaching business leaders. So last Friday, we helped Minister Ed Husic, Minister of Industry and Science, to launch the AI Adopt program. So we're trying to train business owners to understand what AI is, what type of services there are, what skills do they need. So it was a $17 million program that set up 5 offices across Australia to teach businesses in critical sectors like defense, advanced manufacturing, sustainability, and help them understand the business value of AI. And then the other level of education is educating the public. So I mentioned the robo-debt, I mentioned that people died from it. I mentioned that, basically the government ended up having to settle the case, and it was billions of dollars that they got fined, basically. So we have to rehabilitate the public to say AI is not something to be afraid of. It's not going to come and kill you, but, because it's going to cause all this productivity increments. So we're also doing a bit more kind of, yay, AI is great, this is how you can use it, blah, blah, blah. So that's educating the public.
Yeah. Thank you, Suni.
Thanks.
We're coming here to our timetable a little bit over already because of our initial glitch. But I like to each one of the panelists be able to have a last word. And what would be currently at the stage we are today, a best advice for any particular government, be it a federal or state level, to start building a sustainable AI regulatory framework that will actually promote AI as an innovation tool, and also at the same time safeguard all the potential harm that are possible to take place. So I'll see with the order that I had before. So Katherine, if you'd like to take your crack at it, please.
Goodness, okay, I'll try and keep it short. I guess for me, and particularly maybe a focus on my own government, it would be a couple of things. I would be saying focus on the high risk applications. They're the ones that we should be spending most of our time, and allow low risk AI to flourish. Resource your regulators or other legislators accordingly, to ensure that they can effectively carry out their role. These are big challenges that people have to face and look to regulate and govern. And I think two more things: clear lines of escalation for people, both members of the public, but also industry and others, to be able to flag any concerns or discuss any issues related to this, to ensure public but also industry trust. And don't forget about the need for kind of global cooperation and coordination through global standards. Thanks.
Doug, please.
Thank you. This could be a long answer or a short answer, but I'll go with the short answer for the sake of time. But our key message is looking at our own government, of course, but others too. But particularly with the U.S., we think the U.S. needs to lead the world, not only on AI technology, but on the best policy to support innovation and AI. It's important also for our government to know that there are actions being taken in the private sector that support good governance, and I touched on those a little bit during my presentation. And third, we should not lose sight of the good that AI is doing out there today, frankly, in low-risk applications as well as some higher-risk applications. That can get lost in a lot of the hype that surrounds the issue now, but AI is out there doing good, and we need to tell those stories at the same time we're shaping policy.
Thank you very much, Doug. Siew. You're muted.
I've got one point. I've got several points, but I've got one point that I like to make, which is a bit relevant to the education. I feel like the government and general public is a bit worried about AI, and I don't think they understand their biasness compared to the future workforce. I think the younger generation are less afraid of AI than we do. And the problem is, because like Katherine said, they're already using it to do their assignments, so they're not afraid of it. I think, again, back to the education, I think we need to regulate it not out of fear, but regulate it out of innovation. So that's my piece. With regards to government adopting AI, I think there's a dichotomy. I think one part of a government is like draconian. We need to be like regulating them really strict. And then one part of it understands that this is going to happen anyway. And I think we're trying to get the government to slow down and think through and be more measured in its approach and use a risk-based approach to it. And then we also are asking the government to really put money behind it, because there's a few things that the industry can't do really well. We can't incentivize smaller companies to adopt AI, for example. Government's going to have to pick up the slack and do that. So I think there's a few things that we might need to work with the government to help them understand. Government stepping in to assist is very important. It's not something that you can leave it up to industry to do, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Sudhi. Before I hand over to our chairman for closing remarks, I'd like to share all with you that we do have an AI summit in Rio coming up in March. It will take place from the March 12th to the 14th. And we have separated into specific tracks. So we have a track on regulation. We have a track in applications in business. And we also have a track of women in AI specifically. And this will take place in the second week of March. And we'll be very happy to have you all here at that time. I'd like to pass over now to our chairman, Dr. Sean Shi, for closing remarks.
Thank you, Robert. I think it's inspiring sessions. Okay, a lot of thoughts being shared. But I just brought back some of the old experience I had. I started my career, okay, when internet started. Okay, that was in the late 90s. Okay, and again, I used to work for a company called Netscape. Okay, and it is the early stage of Netscape. Okay, we create things like the navigator, we creating like the fast track server, enterprise server. Again, a lot of fears, okay, what internet will be at that point of time. Again, it's one of those things, when a new technology arrives, a new paradigm arrives, there will be fear of that technology will bring more harm than good. But history has proven, okay, I think mankind, we technologies, okay, are smart enough, okay, to navigate through these challenges. Okay, I think internet turned out all right. Okay, again, after 20 over years, okay, it has been a major paradigm shift, okay, for all of us to live our lives, do business, get educations. I think that experience, okay, no matter how dangerous, how worrisome, okay, AI will look like, okay, whether it's singular reality or self-aware, old days internet world is a collaborations. If half the country in the world, okay, do not believe in internet, okay, there will be no internet today, okay, because the adoptions is more important than, okay, be worried about the technology itself will harm human being. I just want to leave with that thought. Okay, I think to streamline, to advocate, to encourage, okay, all level of user to tap into the usage of AI, whether we use ChatGPT, to write some poem or get the kids, to write some love letter for the Mother's Day, that kind of thing. It is a beginning. Okay, and a new paradigm.
Bandwidth issues, Sean?
Yeah, he kind of frozen. Yeah. Well, I want to thank, now he dropped. Well, again, I want to thank you very much, Katherine, Holden, Doug Johnson, Siew Lee. Also, thank Dan and Anders, who've been very supportive in this endeavor for WITSA to produce a policy paper together with CTA and Doug Johnson that can help create some guidelines for our governments. So basically, they don't put a straitjacket on AI for all the good it can provide us. It's a big leapfrog for society and humanity, and can solve many problems that today we are living through, and create a better quality of life for everyone. We're, of course, at the beginning of this road. There's a lot of mileage for us to still cover as we move forward. And like our chairman mentioned in the beginning, we are very privileged to be living this time in life. I call us the cavaliers of transition. And I'm glad to be here, and I hope you all are too. And I thank you very much for your time today.